Hello and welcome to my gold stake deck tier list for 2025. So I was going through the tier list archives and I was looking for another good tier list video to redo. Instead of completely redoing the deck tier list video, which is a little outdated, it was the first tier list I ever did. It was before the first Balatro update. I want to attack it from the angle of gold stakes only. I think that's a very fun way of approaching a deck tier list, and we've been playing a ton of gold stakes on stream and on YouTube, as you've seen. We've gone through all the decks multiple times, and I finally kind of feel after a year of Balatro that I am qualified enough to make this tier list, one that the likes of Raffle did very early on in the game, who is a just absolute beast at high stakes Balatro. But I feel like I'm getting there, I'm coming into my own, and I definitely now have opinions on all the decks when it comes to gold stake. And as you'll see right away, let's jump into it. One deck is already on the tier list, and that's because it gets a row all to its own at the very bottom, Black Deck. So yes, Black Deck gives you +1 Joker slot. Amazing. Unfortunately, with the current state of gold stakes, where it includes all stakes, including the blue stake, which gives you -1 discard, having -1 hand is killer. It is truly disastrous at getting your economy started, because hands are economy in Balatro. It's disastrous in trying to get enough scoring in the early antes. It's disastrous in every sense of the word. Often to the point where you're not really able to use that extra Joker slot and you just die. Black Deck is brutal. Anything that's giving you minus hands, minus discards is bad. It's why, Petroglyph and Hieroglyph, I think, on the higher stakes are not nearly as powerful as they could be. Giving yourself a whole extra ante to ramp stuff up. Well, you lose a hand or discard. That's pretty brutal. It can work, but it's tough. You can win Black Deck's gold stake, but it is tough. And we're almost on like a hot streak with it lately when we've been playing gold stake Black Deck, but it's not fun and it's not pretty, and you are very much pigeonholed into trying to just grab as many jokers as you can, playing very high value hands because you only have 3 of them. And yeah, it's not fun. It's very difficult, and it gets a tier of its own at the bottom. So now let's jump into decks that are a little bit more fun. First is Blue Deck. Maybe the antithesis of the Black Deck in the fact that you get +1 hand, and that's huge. It is such a big plus to have that extra hand right away. It means you don't have to play as high value of hands at the start of the first couple antes to win. It means you get more economy because you have more leftover hands when you do play high value hands and win a blind early. Blue Deck is very good. It's very user friendly, and I think there's a reason it's one of the first decks you unlock. I highly recommend making Blue Deck the first one that you attempt gold stakes on. It will teach you all the fundamentals. It's not crazy different than the base of what Balatro is, but that extra hand is like a little handicap helping you through the gold stakes, and it's one of my best when it comes to win percentages. I think it's just very easy to navigate, and the lines that you can take with it, the starting economy you get with the extra hand are just so good. It is in the A tier for me. Red Deck, having that extra discard to kind of counteract blue stake is very good. Now, it's not extra economy like the Blue Deck with an extra hand, but an extra discard can be very powerful, and it can be economy if you get something like a mail-in rebate. So it's just below Blue Deck. I am going to put it in the B tier, though. I don't think I can put it on the same playing field, because I do think there's a clear step down starting with Blue Deck and starting with Red Deck. But you're talking about them very similarly. They're giving you that extra discard or extra hand to play. The thing is, with Red Deck, you kind of need a little bit more to make it worth your while when it comes to economy. But when it comes to searching for hands, getting that extra discard is very powerful, and it still is a very good base deck to play. Moving on to Green Deck, I have a new personal hatred for it because I was just struggling so much in our road to completionist plus on my main profile playing it. Now, we have played Green Deck Gold Stake quite a bit in the past, and I didn't remember struggling as much with it. I think before this week I may have put it in the C tier, but hear me out. I'm putting it in D tier because it destroys one of the pillars I think you should have when playing Balatro Gold Stakes, and that is get your economy going to get that guaranteed $5 of interest. You don't get interest on the green deck. It's horrible in my opinion. And there's so many reasons that this is bad. Of course, just not getting the free $5 is bad enough. But I think that free $5 on gold stake, specifically the top stake, is very important because it really opens the door for getting rental jokers, where you know that that rental fee is being paid off by your interest every single round. It's very harmful in that way. Another part is that if you get into the whole pair gaming high card build, which I do think is a very, very, very viable strategy for playing gold stakes, it's much tougher on green deck because now you have no hands or discards remaining, which is your real main source of economy, because you have no interest to fall back on. It's brutal. It's, I think, hurtful. It's probably the one deck on here outside of black deck that I think is actually like just a pure negative, the gameplay mechanic that it's introducing, although I don't think it's as bad as black deck, and it is survivable. As we've seen in the past, it's still not good, and I'm going to put it just above the black deck in the D tier. Moving on to yellow deck, this is getting put in the A tier. Blue deck, yes, having that extra hand helps you through all 8 antes. It is very important, but I'd argue the biggest factor is that extra hand giving you early extra economy to kind of snowball your build into something winnable for the 8 antes on gold stake. Well, yellow deck does that right away by giving you extra money. Your economy is going like that. If you can't find a good joker, you could even re-roll in the first shop, which is not something you could say with any of these other decks on gold stake. So yeah, yellow deck is just very nice. I think it is one of the best decks to streak on just because it is so reliable to have that money at the start. You know you're going to be able to at least survive the first couple antes, and then you can let your Balatro gameplay shine and you can figure out a way to win the rest of the run. I find a lot of times when playing gold stakes, I'm either losing very early or with the final boss. And the yellow deck really eliminates a lot of those losses early on, if not completely eliminates them. I mean, with that much money early on, you should not lose in the early antes. I'm almost talking myself to putting it into S tier. I'm going to put it above the blue deck, but I do think these are both fantastic gold stake decks. Next is Magic Deck. And I think if I was making a super reasonable level-headed take, it's A tier. But this was my video and I can do what I want. I'm putting it in S tier. I love Magic Deck. It was my favorite when the game came out. I think it then was overshadowed by Ghost Deck for a while, maybe abandoned for a little bit, and now, once again, my beloved Magic Deck. You are my favorite. I love having the extra consumable slot right off the bat. Plus, that's a voucher I don't have to worry about buying later on. And, of course, you start with 2 Fools. And this is so important, because this means if I get 1 planet card in the first shop, I can level up a hand to level 4. Let's say there's a Saturn in the first shop. Well, I buy it, I use my 2 Fools on it as well, and all of a sudden I have level 4 straights before I'm even entering the big blind of Ante 1. That's incredible scaling. That assures you that you win in the early game. And of course, you have that extra consumable slot all the way through. But the reason I'm putting this in S tier above maybe a blue deck or yellow deck that help you early on as well is it's very moldable to whatever you want to do, right? Let's say you get a good joker right away. You don't need the extra hand levels. Well, you can hold out for Hermit and expedite your economy. If you want to have fun, like I've done a couple times, you could use the 2 Fools on the Judgment. All of a sudden, you get 3 Jokers, which guarantee don't have a tag, by the way, because when you use Judgment, they can't be perishable, rental, or eternal. And you get, you pull the slot machine 3 times, you're probably going to get something okay to start out in it. You kind of let that dictate your run. Heck, you can use it on gold cards. You can use it on Hierophants. You can use it on lucky cards. It just allows for so many different fun builds while also being extremely viable and winnable. I do find Magic Deck the most fun to streak on gold stakes recently, and I highly recommend it. I think it is one of the best. Moving on to Ghost Deck. I honestly have fallen out of love with Ghost Deck, especially on gold stakes. I was tempted to put in D tier, but I do think that is just kind of asinine. And the thing that saves Ghost Deck, in my opinion, is that Hex. But hear me out. The real reason you're playing Ghost Deck is, those spectral cards in the shop are cool. Yes, on white stake, you create enough economy to reroll the shops enough that you see a lot of those spectral cards. You can't do that on gold stake, and you honestly don't see spectral cards very often at all. I think the percentage is like 5% is the chance of it popping up, maybe even slightly lower. And the thing is, you can't re-roll because you're really battling for economy on gold stake. So that whole benefit of spectral cards in the shop is nil. I really see this as kind of a plain deck outside of the fact that you do get that hex to start out, which can help in the early antes win a couple of blinds a little bit easier, maybe build up that economy a little bit quicker. So for that reason, I wouldn't say it's on the green deck D tier level, but I still do not think it's very good. I'd much rather just have the extra discard, for example, than start off with that hex. Because the other thing is, you have to have a joker to hex, right? And if you enter that first shop and it's just a crappy rental or a perishable, it may not even be that helpful to have that hex card in your consumable slot to start. So all in all, very mixed feelings on how beneficial the powers of the ghost deck actually are, especially at high stakes. I do think it is a ton of fun on lower stakes, but for this tier list, it's going to go in the C tier. Next, we have the Nebula deck, and I'm going to be putting the Nebula deck right in the A tier. It starts you off with arguably the best voucher to get outside of an extra hand when it comes to gold stakes, the Telescope. Telescope is so good. I really do wish Thunk would remove the negative of having only one consumable slot. Yes, it would make it even more powerful, but the thing is, these decks are not all even in power levels. Some decks are better, some decks are bad. I think the -1 consumable slot just makes it less fun. It does harm it. It does make it less powerful, but it also makes it a lot less fun. So, Thunk, if you're watching this, give us our consumable slot back and let us just have the Telescope voucher. But let's talk about gold stake. Reliably getting hand level scaling throughout the entire game, because every single planet pack that I open, every celestial pack that I open will have my most played hand, is so great. It is great for high card builds, it's great for straight builds, it's great for 4 of a kind builds. Heck, if you're playing flush 5s, it's great for that too. It's so good. That is the best voucher, in my opinion, to get on gold stake again, outside of maybe the extra hand. And you start out with it, which means I don't have to pay $10 for it, which means I reliably have that from the get-go, which means, heck, if I have a celestial pack in the first shop, I get the planet card from the hand I just played in the small blind. That's amazing. That's, again, it's risk mitigation to the max. It's hand level scaling to the max. It's a fantastic deck to play. That is very reliable, very easy to win on. Checkered Deck. I'm going to go ahead and... I really don't know if I should put in the A or B tier. I'm going to put at the top of the B tier. I do think, yes, being able to play flushes extremely reliably is great. It also gives you a very clear win condition throughout the entire game. Like, level up my flushes, find jokers that work with that, and just go that route. You can also maybe play flush houses, but I do find that kind of restrictive. And again, flushes are not great at scaling in Balatro. Now, if you get something like an ancient joker or some help there, yeah, you can play you can play flushes very reliably. If you get Arrowhead, for example, like the only thing that's really going to kill you is the spade cards being debuffed. So all in all, I still think Checkered is powerful. Having those flushes is very powerful, but flushes just don't scale quick enough for me to put this in the A tier. I still think you're going to run into plenty of opportunities for you to die, for you just not to scale quick enough for maybe antes 3, 4, and 5. Specifically, the wall, I find, it hurts you on every gold stake run, but especially on Checkered, because, again, you're probably using flushes for your scaling, and they just don't scale fast enough to kind of beat the wall to get the points over the hump there. So, is it better than Ghost? Yes, it has a very good benefit of having the deck kind of thinned out in the way of suits. You can play those flushes easy. But in general, it's maybe not as powerful as you might think when looking at first glance. Zodiac Deck is going to go in the B tier. And the only reason it's not in C tier is because Dr. Spectered hit me with some math that technically every shop you see 10% more jokers. So here's the thing with Zodiac Deck. You start off with 3 vouchers, which is kind of cool. That's 3 vouchers I don't have to buy, but 2 of them I don't want on Gold Stake a lot of the time. You have Tarot and Planet Merchant, which means Tarot cards and Planet cards are going to show up in the shop more. And you get Overstock, which means you see 3 items in the shop window instead of 2. Now, technically the math is on that. Despite having the Tarot and Planet Merchant, because you have that extra slot, you are going to see 10% more jokers per shop. It doesn't feel that way, but math doesn't care about your feelings. And for that reason, the fact that I am going to see 10% more jokers and just more options in general in the shop, it is the B tier for me. Those options in the shop allow you to play the game in more unique ways. It allows you to get the thing you need to survive more often. And I do think the tarot cards can be very strong. They're oftentimes underrated when it comes to survivability on Gold Stakes, like having that extra or especially Hierophant, which I've talked about in my recent consumable card tier list. Getting those chips with a Hierophant can be very, very, very beneficial. So all in all, I do think Zodiac is powerful. The thing is, you need money to shop, and you're always fighting for economy on the Gold Stakes. Countering my own point there, the one nice thing is you don't have to reroll as often, and the rerolls are worth more due to the Overstock voucher, which that's kind of the benefit of, well, if you don't have a lot of economy, you can't sit there and hit reroll 15 times. At least, I'm seeing 3 options right away. So it's a happy medium for me. It is better than Ghost Deck, but it's nowhere near the level of the A tier ones, and I would argue it's at the bottom of B tier for me. I'd much rather have the extra discard, and if I'm honest, I'd rather just make all my cards 2 suits in Checkered Deck, but I do think the benefit is better than Ghost Deck. Anaglyph Deck. If I would have done this video at the beginning of this update, I probably, what is that, 9 months ago, probably would have put this in C or B tier, but honestly, Raffle and Dr. Right, skipping is really bad on Gold Stakes, and as I've gotten a lot better at Gold Stakes, as I've been playing it a lot more these past couple months, I don't ever skip, nor can I really afford to skip. It hurts a lot to skip a whole shop, to skip a whole blind where you can get money, whether that's from interest from the hands or from jokers that you have. So because you almost never want to skip when it comes to Gold Stakes, the whole benefit of Anaglyph Deck is mute. The double tags don't help you because you can't skip, because you can't afford to skip, nor do you want to. It's a bad deal. The double tags make it a little bit more worth it because you're going to get 2 of that reward, but it's not much. And so for that reason, oftentimes you're playing Anaglyph Deck basically like it's a standard 52 card deck with no benefits and nothing really harming you. I will say the thing that maybe pushes it over the edge of a green deck maybe, and why it's higher in this one tier, is because if you need a Hail Mary play, right? Oh, let me just get 2 holographic jokers and I at least can survive to see the shop. Or 2 mega buffoon packs with the double tag, and I absolutely need to get jokers. It does allow for this Hail Mary like play, I think, with the double tags for skips. But generally speaking, most of the time, Anaglyph Deck really is giving you no benefit. And I don't think it's very good on Gold Stakes. I think it's a lot more fun on the lower stakes, but similar to Ghost Deck. But most of the time, it's not going to give you almost any benefit. And unlike Ghost Deck, it's not even like you're starting out with something like a Hex or whatever that's giving you the benefit in the first ante. In fact, you get nothing in the first ante. You don't get that double tag until you defeat the first boss. Now we have the Painted Deck. So, Black Deck is here in the bottom because while it does give you the extra Joker slot, it takes away a hand. Painted Deck takes away a Joker slot but gives you hand size. So where does it get put? Well, it gets put in D tier, so pretty awful. Joker slots are very, very valuable. They're not quite worth a hand valuable, but they are very valuable. And having 4 Joker slots on this Gold Stake is pretty constrictive in terms of what you can do. You have to play high value hands. And yes, you do get the hand size increase to help you find those high value hands of straights or 4 of a kinds or whatnot. But I would not make that trade-off, and I do find the Painted Deck very difficult to navigate, and you really have to find the right things to be able to play it. Eternal Jokers are miserable on Painted Deck because every slot is worth much more. You're now taking up 25% of my Joker real estate instead of 20%. So if you're a bad Eternal that can help me survive today, but it's not beneficial long term, you almost can't take it with Painted Deck. It can be very brutal and unforgiving, and for that reason, it's in the D tier. I do think it's slightly above gold or green deck, but I actually would argue I'd rather just get what I kind of said, the standard 52 card base gold. Again, I treat Anaglyph Deck almost like it's a challenge deck, like it's just what it is. Then deal with the -1 Joker slot and the extra hand size. It's hard to play. It's hard to navigate. It's not unwinnable. Again, I have a much better win percentage on this than I do Black Deck. Well, actually, right now it might be the same again because we keep getting lucky with Black Deck. But all in all, it's a bad one. It's difficult, and I do think it really changes the way you have to approach every shop in the game. Now, that can be fun. Challenging is fun. That's why we play on Gold Stake. But in turn, this tier list is for how good it is, and for me, it's in the D tier, and it's pretty darn bad. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. You lose a Joker slot. I mean, that's not good when you need Jokers to score enough points in the extremely quick and fast-paced Gold Stakes. Moving on to Abandoned Deck, which is a breath of fresh air amongst the past couple. We're going to put this immediately in S tier and at the top of S tier. Look, you're thinning out my deck for me. Are you taking out maybe the most powerful playing cards and face cards? Yeah, but deck thinning is deck thinning. And I always preach this. This is why Immolate is the best consumable card. It's why Hung Men are some of the best tarot cards. Making your deck smaller means you get the cards you want to come out more often. An Abandoned Deck is already starting with a very small deck. It makes straights very easy to play. It makes 4 of a kinds very easy to play. It can make straight flushes or flush houses even a lot easier to play. And with just a few more things like a trading card, an Immolate, a Hung Man, you can immediately get your deck to a place where you're probably happy with it for the rest of the game. You can get every card that you want out, even with one less discard every single round. So for that reason, Abandoned Deck for me is kind of the GOAT. It is the one I often choose to streak on. If you're asking me, like, let's see how many Gold Stake wins you can get on any deck, Zaino, I'm going to pick Abandoned Deck because I feel like it's so much easier to navigate. Now, I will say the first ante is a little rough. Maybe you have a little bit less economy because it's a little bit harder to get the points you need. But oftentimes you do luck into a 4 of a kind or at least a 10 high straight, and you're able to one-shot the first blind and still two-shot the second blind and the boss and get through it. But that's the one place where Abandoned Deck is a little difficult. And, of course, you get no photo chat. Of course, photograph and chat is so powerful. But if you do somehow miraculously come across that combo, or maybe you have a Chad and then you see a photograph in the shop, you can always still strength a couple 10s and get jacks. Would I recommend that? Maybe not, but there's still a route there to at least get face cards, generally speaking. So overall, my thoughts on Abandoned Deck is it's S tier. It's super good. I have a much higher win rate on this deck than I do most others, and I think it is just consistent at its core. Moving on to Plasma Deck. I don't think this is quite D tier, but I do think Plasma Deck on Gold Stake winning 8 antes is decently difficult. Now for White Stake, of course, it's the most powerful deck. It's super fun. But on Gold Stake, where the scoring requirement is already scaling faster, and now it scales even faster because you're playing on Plasma, it's tough because there's not a ton of good chip jokers. And the way to win early on Plasma is using chips. Gain your chip count really high, dividing that into, then squaring it basically to get your score. And then eventually at some point you have enough X molt jokers that you can make the switch to making your molt really high, dividing that by 2 and, squaring it. That's the whole balance mechanic, right? It balances your chips, your molt, and then it squares that score. But that's just it. It's much harder to get the run going on Gold Stake because there's just not enough chip jokers that it's a reliable thing. And I actually think it's maybe even slightly worse than the Ghost Deck due to that. Generally speaking, if you're just asking me to win a run, even on White Stake, I don't know if I choose Plasma. I may choose it, but I don't know. But now that we're talking Gold Stakes where you're not able to search through many shops for what you need for those chip jokers or for those X-Malt jokers for the eventual switch. It's very, very tough. Now, I will say with Plasma Deck, you do every once in a while have a very free run, if you will, by getting a Stuntman and a Blueprint or a Bull and a ton of economy, right? There's certain aspects to Plasma that can make it basically an easy W. But generally speaking, if you pick, a random run, you're rolling a D20, more times than not, you're going to roll on a run that is very, very difficult to navigate, that you're going to be put in a very uncomfortable position in the mid game where, okay, how do I switch to X-Malt without killing the run right here? It's not very often you just fall into a victory with, Stuntman, the Bull, or, maybe multiple X-Malt jokers in one shop to make it very clear to you, like, okay, here, this is the time I'm going to make the switch to X-Malt. So, yeah. I put this in C tier in difficulty, and I also think it's like expert level difficulty when it comes to how to navigate the run. I would argue it's even harder than the ones in D tier, but once you learn how to do it and you have enough practice with the Plasma Deck, it is slightly better than these in D. Finally, Erratic, which is going to get put in S tier. Look, more times than not, when you just roll a random deck with Erratic, you're going to get 6 of a certain rank, which means 4 of a kind becomes very, very viable. And 4 of a kind is one of the best scaling hands in this game. And again, on a random roll, it is very likely you get 6 of a rank, if not 7, 8, or 9. Sometimes you get a couple of 5 of a certain rank or several of 5 of a certain rank. But even then, 4 of a kinds is pretty viable. Or maybe you have a lot of one suit and you can play flushes. The key here is with Erratic is more times than not, you're rolling into a type of deck that kind of has its win condition set out for you and is not too difficult to find. It's for me one of the easiest ones to win, and I do want to kind of try and streak with it. A lot of people don't think to streak with Erratic because every game's going to be a little bit different, so you can't really get into a rhythm. But like I said, because so many times you're high rolling into 6, 7, 8 of a certain rank, it's a 4 of a kind heaven, and it's not too hard to draw those 4 of a kinds if you're going to give me 7 of a certain rank. And of course, you can get a couple tarots to make that really straightforward going forward. But all in all, a lot of times Erratic is kind of like Checkered on steroids in a way, where it's going to make the win condition very simple in the early game, allows you to build up that economy quickly, and your run is easy to pilot. Maybe in that way, the opposite of the Plasma Deck, where I would argue Erratic, you take a look at that deck and you're like, oh, okay, that's how I need to play it. This is going to be straightforward. You go out. So yeah, even though Erratic Deck is the last deck that you're going to unlock, I do think it's one of the most newbie-friendly decks to gold stake on. And, well, that's my tier list. So in the S tier, we have Abandoned, Magic, and Erratic. In A tier, we have Yellow, Blue, and Nebula. In B tier, we have Checkered, Red Deck, and Zodiac. In the C tier, in the mid tier, we have that Ghost Plasma. D tier, decks I find hard to win on gold stakes, we have Anaglyph, Painted, and Green Deck. And then in the final tier, in Hell, is Black Deck. Ugh, just makes me shudder. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this gold stake deck tier list. It is, well, as of yesterday, I'm recording this on the 1-year anniversary, but it is my 1-year anniversary of content creation. This was the first day I streamed the demo on Twitch. It's the day I created my YouTube channel. So happy 1 anniversary and 1 day to me and to all of you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the support, love. If you've gotten this far in this video, you're obviously enjoying the content to some extent, so I just want to thank you for that. And yeah, if you can comment down below your favorite Zaino moment and your favorite gold stake deck, that would be wonderful. If you're not subscribed, clicking that subscribe button would help out a lot, but no pressure. If you like this one, drop a like. If you disliked it, drop a dislike. And we'll see you for the next one very soon.